Okay. Start, sir.
1 minute. Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Raman Kendra Delhi's Sunday Satsang with Raghav ji for the month of April 2024. After a long time, it is our good fortune to see Narayanan ji back in the shrine after his health episode. A very warm welcome to him. And now I shall request Narayanan ji to initiate with puja. Sir.
मैं पता तुमने तब देखेगा दुर्गा प्राण विज्ञान बोलो I'm going to recite the Bhagwan Stotram. अपार सच्चित सुखवारे राशर्य स्वामी मात्रम भुवनम समस्तम गुहाहितम तम रमणम गंभीरम चिंता विहीनम हृदय चिंत्यामि ओम आशे मोशे जाताय नमः ओम श्री रमणाय नमः ओम गुरुवे नमः ओम अखंड संविदाकाराय नमः ओम ओजसे मना ओम कानोद्वाय नमः ओम जगत हितावताराय नमः ओम श्री भूमिनाथ चतुर्दशीनाय नमः ओम पराशर कुलतंसाय नमः ओम सुंदराय तपोफलाय नमः ओम कमनीय सुचारित्राय नमः ओम साम सायवते नमः ओम श्री सोनचल मोली मोलसाय नमः ओम स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः ओम श्रीमद्वाद शांत मां सतल लब्ध विद्याय नमः ओम मां शक्ति निपातन प्रबुद्धाय नमः ओम परमार्थ विदे नमः ओम तीव्राय नमः ओम पितृपदान विष्णु नमः ओम इंदु मोलिना पितृपते नमः ओम पितर देशते शोन शैल प्राप्ताय नमः ओम तपोम्याय नमः ओम उदासीनाय नमः ओम महायोगिने नमः ओम मोसाय नमः ओम कुशाग्रंथने नमः ओम शांत संकल्प सम्राय नमः ओम सुसदस्य नमः ओम सवित्रे नमः ओम स्थिराय नमः ओम तपय शपि ससंगाय नमः ओम फुलाम्बुज विलोचनाय नमः ओम चंद्रकाशी श्री मंडित नन्मंडलाय नमः ओम शूद्र समासीनाय नमः ओम शूद्र खिल मग्राय नमः ओम वेद वेतात ओम शिव मुद्रे नमः ओम त्रिगुणाते गाय नमः ओम विरूपाल गुहावसाय नमः ओम विराजा चलाकृते नमः ओम उदित नयनाय नमः ओम पूर्णाय नमः ओम नृत्याचल तांडवाय नमः ओम गंभीराय नमः ओम परमाचार्याय नमः ओम सुप्रसन्नाय नमः ओम अभयप्रदाय नमः ओम दक्षिण से निभाय नमः ओम धीराय नमः ओम दक्षिण विमुखाय नमः ओम सवराजे नमः ओम अर्षे नमः ओम भगवते नमः ओम ईड्याय नमः। ओम ओम विद्या विशारदाय नमः। ओम ओम दीर्दर्शने नमः। ओम आपताय नमः। ओम विष्णुमार्ग प्रदर्शकाय नमः। संदर्शे नमः। ओम सत्य दर्शे नमः। ओम सत्याय नमः। ओम प्रशांताय नमः। ओम अग्नि सूर्य कुमाराय नमः। ओम अति विक्रमाय नमः। ओम सुकुमाराय नमः। ओम सदानंदाय नमः। ओम मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ओम दयान्वाय नमः। ओम श्री सोनाचल हदभूत सिकंदर्शम निकेतनाय नमः। ओम सदर्शनोपदेष्टे नमः। ओम सदभक्त वृंद परिवृताय नमः। ओम गणेश मुनि भृंग सेवितांदी सोरुहाय नमः। ओम गीतोपदेश सारदिगण संशयाय नमः। ओम वनश्रम मतातीताय नमः। ओम रसज्ञाय नमः। ओम सौम्याय नमः। ओम आत्मते नमः। ओम सर्वानिमित तथा माराध्याय नमः। ओम सरस्वती नमः। ओम आत्मा रामाय नमः। ओम महाभागाय नमः। ओम आत्ममुक्ति विधायकाय नमः। ओम विनताय नमः। ओम विनुताय नमः। ओम विप्राय नमः। ओम मुनिंद्राय नमः। ओम पावको जुलाय नमः। ओम दर्शन धन सहायने नमः। ओम मोनेन स्वात बोधकाय नमः। ओम ऋच कांतिका सानिध्याय नमः। ओम सन्नदन मोचकाय नमः। ओम अंत से चंडाशे नमः। ओम संसारना वर्तकाय नमः। ओम श्री सोनाचल संस्कृत देष्टे नमः। ओम हार्दिद्या प्रकाशकाय नमः। ओम अविचलित प्रज्ञाय नमः। ओम नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः। ओम कमंडलूधराय नमः। ओम शुभ कोपिनवशाय नमः। ओम गुहाय नमः। ओम दंडपाने नमः। ओम कृपा पूर्णाय नमः। ओम भवरोग विषज्ञाय नमः। ओम स्कंदाय नमः। ओम देवत्माय नमः। ओम अमर्त्याय नमः। ओम सैन्यान्वय नमः। ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। हरि ओम। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। हरि ओम श्री रमणाय नमः। I'm going to start Updesha. कर्तुरा गया प्रापते फलम करम किम परम करम तज्जडम इति मोदितो पतन कारणम फलम शाश्वतम गति निरोधकम ईश्वरापितम नित्याकितम चित्त शोधकम मुक्ति साधकम कायवं मने कार्यमुत्तमम पूजनम जप चिंतनम क्रमात् जगतीशदी युक्त सेवनम अष्टमूर्ति देव पूजनम उच्चमस्तवा दुच्चमंदत चित्तजम जप ध्यानमुत्तमम आज धारया सोत समम सरल चिंतनम विरलते परम भेद भावना सोहमिस्सो भावना विता पावनी मता भाव शून्य से भाव सुस्ति भावना बला ये भक्ति उत्तम चले मने स्वस्थता किया भक्ति योग वो दाश निश्चितम वायुरोदना लीते मने जाल पक्षी वे दोध साधनम चित्त वायुवा चित्त की आयुता शागोदय शक्ति मूलिका लय विनाशने कुबेरोदने लय गतम पुने भक्ति नोमित प्राण बंधना लीन मानसम एक चिंतना नाश मेदते नष्ट मानसो कृष्ट योगिने कितमस्ति किम स्वस्थितम यत दृश्यवायितम शीतात्मना शीत दर्शनम तत्व दर्शनम मानसम कुकी मार्गने किते नैव मानसम मार्गार्जवात वित्तस्त वित्तिमाशिता वृत्तियो मनो विचय मने हेम्यम कुतो भक्ति चिंतवते अयपतत्यहम निज विचारणम हेमिनाशबा यम्यमत्या श्रुति अर्च्यम परम पूर्ण सत इदम पदे अभिकमीन हेमिलीन के अपल्य सत्य युगेंद्रिय प्राणहित में नाम तज्जड़म सत्यभाषिका चित्तवेतरा सत्यायश चित्याय ईश जीव्यो व्यश दिविदा तस्भाव तो वस्तु केवलम वेशानते स्वातुदर्शनम ईश दर्शनम स्वात्मरूपते आत्मसंस्थि स्वातुदर्शनम आत्मनिर्दया आत्मनिष्ठिता ज्ञान वर्जिता अज्ञानहीन ज्ञानमस्ति ज्ञातु मंत्रम किम स्वरूप में आत्मदर्शने अव्यभव पूर्णचि सुखम बंध मुक्ति तम परम सुखम विंदती जी वस्तुदेविका एम पेतकम निज विमानकम मैदियम तपो रमनवाग्यम एम पेतकम निज विमानकम मैदिदम तपो रमनवाग्यम हरिओम। ओवर टू नाव जी।
Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Sunday Satsang with Raghav ji. Raghav ji shall be speaking with us this evening on the earliest set of instructions given by Bhagavan in his own handwriting, condensed in the form of Vichara Sangraha or self-inquiry as preserved by Gambhiran Seshaya. Raghavji has been addressing devotees of Raman Kendra Delhi for a very long time, but for some of the devotees joining us for the first time, a brief background. Raghavji is a devotee of Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharishi with a background of Vedanta study under various acharyas of Rishikesh and Uttarkashi over several years. After completing a degree in technology in 1993 and a few years of research in electronics, he was drawn to the exclusive pursuit of the path of self-inquiry. He was blessed to be closely associated with the Ramakrishna mission, Arsha Vidya tradition, and the Adi Shankara Brahma Vidya Peeth, Uttarkashi. Since 2001, Raghavji divides his time between Uttarkashi and Thiruvannamalai. He occasionally shares what he has learned from the acharyas with fellow devotees. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Namaste and welcome. Om Apara Satchit Sukhavari Rashehe Yasyormi Matram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabiram Sinta Vihinam Pritichintayami. Welcome to this talk on Vichara Sangraha, where we were looking at the questions posed by Sri Gambhiram Seshaya. We saw in the previous class how Bhagavan draws our attention to the Jnana Ashtangas, which are the more deeper aspects of what can be called the Patanjali's Ashtangas or 8 limbs of Patanjali. So those very 8 limbs have been reinterpreted and recast in a different context. All of them are laden with jnana or knowledge and self-inquiry. And so these are known as the Jnana Ashtangas, in contrast to the Yoga Ashtangas, which are the regular practice of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. So here those very words have a deeper connotation as self-inquiry and the abidance as the self. And we saw how in the highest 2 stages of dhyana and samadhi, there is meditation in the form of I am only pure consciousness. So this is not a thought, but instead a gentle relaxing back into one's own nature. Just as we leave the slippers outside a temple and get into a shrine, similarly, I gently leave aside my roles, all that are laden with some challenge. I develop that capacity to leave those roles aside and come back to relating to Bhagavan to start with, and then the truth of the self as I am only pure consciousness. Bhagavan says, for dhyanam, using the Jnana Ashtanga methodology, as different from Patanjali's Yoga Ashtangas, he says, leaving aside the body which consists of 5 sheaths, one inquires, who am I? And as a result of that, one stays as I, which shines as the self. So it is a natural dwelling upon and coming back to being oneself. And in Samadhi, what Bhagavan says is, it's not a new experience. The word Samadhi very commonly has a connotation, it is some new magical experience. Instead, the way Bhagavan talks of Samadhi is, you are already in Samadhi. You have to just stop doing the non-Samadhi aspect of your thinking. So when the I manifestation also ceases, there is subtle direct experience. This is Samadhi. In other words, right now, the self, which is consciousness, already is there. However, I am holding on to some wrong notions. I'm holding on to some other things contrary to the truth of the self. And so in the meaning of Samadhi here, that I manifestation, which is to let go of all the external roles and so on, and just abiding as the self, and then there is total spontaneous relaxation. That is Samadhi here. There is no effort in this Samadhi here. There is no special new experience here, because the self is not a new experience. It's not something that comes and goes. It is that which is always there. And so then Bhagavan goes on to say, for pranayama, which is detailed in these jnana ashtangas, which Bhagavan is talking about, for pranayama detailed here, the disciplines such as asana, etc., which are mentioned in connection with yoga, are not necessary. Normally, you have asana as yoga postures, various sometimes challenging twists and contortions have their place. They are not to be dismissed. They are treated with respect. They are part of the tradition. However, there is a higher meaning for asana where Bhagavan says the highest asana is nididhyasana, he says. And so the disciplines such as asana, etc., are not really necessary for these ashtangas. You're not being asked to do all of that and then finally come to this. Not so. You can begin right away with self-knowledge, self-inquiry. So these practices can be directly undertaken, says Bhagavan. The limbs of knowledge may be practiced at all times and at all places. Of yoga and knowledge, one may follow whichever is pleasing to one, or both, according to circumstances. So you can continue to practice the yoga ashtangas of asana, pranayama, and so on. And you can do this as well. Or you can do one of them, whichever works for you in quietening the mind, you can follow that. The great teachers say that forgetfulness is the root of all evil and is death for those who seek release. So one should rest the mind in oneself and should never forget the self. This is the aim. If the mind is controlled, all else can be controlled. The distinction between yoga with 8 limbs and knowledge with 8 limbs has been set forth elaborately in the sacred texts. So only the substance of this teaching has been given here. Jnana Ashtangas are referred to in detail in Aparokshanubhuti, and other texts. So here Bhagavan is just referred to in brief with that. It is said that in the Sanat Sujatiya, which Bhagavan is referencing here, it is said, forgetfulness is the root cause of evil and is death for those who seek release. There's a beautiful aphorism. Pramado vai mrityuhu. Pramada is mrityu. Pramada is carelessness, indifference, and lack of paying attention. All of these senses are there in the word pramadaha. And pramado vai mrityuhu, says Sanat Sujata, a great sage. So death is not really death of the body. Let the body die. If you are awareful, then you are always one with the self. So for this great sage Sanat Sujata, he says death doesn't exist really. It's only the physical body which dies. He's taking a higher stand there. But then he goes on to say, Pramado vai mrityuhu, the real death is happening from every moment to moment if we are not paying attention to this treasure which we have right underneath our feet or right behind our nose, so to speak. That consciousness, which is the truth of what I am, there is a relaxation in that. I need to show up and devote that half an hour minimum per day to come back to being myself. And from there, your own mind, Bhagavan's grace will guide you. So, Pramado vai mrityuhu is a very significant statement of Sanat Sujata, saying carelessness, indifference is death. Here, the word used is forgetfulness, is the root cause of all evil and is death for those who seek release. Forgetfulness. The idea here is, I am not attentive, I am indifferent, I forget. That is the real death, says Bhagavan. And so, the next question that the disciple asks, 35th question here is it possible to practice at the same time the pranayama belonging to yoga and also the pranayama pertaining to knowledge? And Bhagavan answers, so long as the mind has not been made to rest in the heart, either through absolute retention, kevala kumbhaka, or through inquiry, rechaka, puraka, etc., as are needed. Hence, the pranayama of yoga is to be practiced during training, that is the initial phase, and the other pranayama may be practiced always. Thus, both may be practiced. It is enough if the yogic pranayama is practiced till skill is gained in absolute retention. So Bhagavan is placing the regular asana practice and breath control and so on as preparatory. So you can practice that along with the jnana pranayama as well. What is jnana pranayama? You remember the jnana ashtanga? So pranayama there, Bhagavan said is, you reject all the names and forms, by which is meant you stop allowing the mind to go on dwelling upon various roles, various objects of the world, and worrying and then becoming kind of worked up about them and anxious about the future. So those things Bhagavan says you can voluntarily relax in by using the jnana pranayama. So Bhagavan says Rechaka is removing the two unreal aspects of nama and rupa, all the names and forms, from the objects. It is not easy, but somewhere we have to start. Constituting the world, and then the body, etc., are left aside. Then what happens? Puraka is grasping the three real aspects, which is existence, consciousness, and bliss. Here it means that in and through every single experience, right from childhood to now, there is one reality, one existence that I am. That I am is of the very nature of consciousness. That I am and consciousness are just synonyms. So you stay with that, reject all the other passing roles in your life, passing incidental experiences. You learn to, in your meditation to start with, make a distinction. Here I am just the basic conscious being. Start there and then go forward from there. And so what is constant in all the objects is Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, and bliss. Kumbhaka is retaining those aspects thus grasped. So once you arrive at Sat and Chit and Ananda, that there is fullness even without doing anything, just as in deep sleep there is a fullness, but of course there's unaware fullness. That same fullness of deep sleep, here and now, I try to come back. I arrive at by negating all the names and forms. In other words, I stop worrying about different names and forms. Allow the mind to just come back to being the self. Then Kumbhaka is staying there. So this is the Jnana Pranayama as distinguished from inhalation through the left nostril retention, and then exhalation through the right, and then vice versa. So that is also very good, says Bhagavan, but you can do this jnana pranayama also along with your regular breath control pranayama. So that is Bhagavan's teaching here. And finally, it is enough if yogic pranayama is practiced only till skill is gained in absolute retention. So once you have a certain capacity for kumbhaka, be it even for a few seconds, if your mind is relatively still, Bhagavan is encouraging us, nudging us to go towards the jnana pranayama, which is through self-understanding and self-abidance. So therefore, you need not give up the other pranayama of breath work, but then as you master a certain degree of kumbhaka or breath retention, that's a sign that you can now stick purely to the jnana process here, jnana pranayama. The next question, the disciple follows up and says, why should the path to release be differently taught? Will it not create confusion in the minds of aspirants? So Bhagavan has said the regular ashtangas are there, like pranayama, asana, then the jnana ashtangas are there. So all these different paths, why are they being taught? Aren't they going to create confusion? And Bhagavan answers, several paths are taught in the Vedas to suit the different grades of qualified aspirants. Yet, since release is but the destruction of mind, all efforts have further aim the control of mind. Although the modes of meditation may appear to be different from one another, in the end, all of them become one. There is no need to doubt this. One may adopt the path which suits the maturity of one's mind. This is a very versatile idea called Adhikari Bheda. Based on the readiness and the level of the aspirant, there are different practices, which is why no practice is overly emphasized that everyone should practice only this and none another. There's a great deal of customization allowed there. Sometimes, if you have a teacher, he may be able to guide you which path suits you better, or pray to Bhagavan in your quieter moments. You will know which path I can more focus on. As Bhagavan has explained, the other yogic pranayama, etc., is complementary to the jnana method. You don't have to give up one and look down on that and say, oh, that is all inferior. I am practicing self inquiry. There is no need for any kind of ego trip based on practice of self inquiry. Bhagavan says you can practice both, and gradually you will find this is complete. You don't need to practice the others. So, never is there any condemnation or condescension towards the other. It's only a preparatory practice, very helpful. You can continue to do that, but then you will gradually, automatically glide into the jnana ashtangas. And so different methods are there to suit the different grades of aspirants, says Bhagavan. The control of prana, which is yoga, and the control of the mind, which is jnana. These are the two principal means for destruction of the mind. So Bhagavan uses the word manonasha. So remember, manonasha doesn't mean there is some object you have to destroy, because anything you destroy, it will come back. So it only means that through knowledge, the mind resolves into its source, which is consciousness. So it's not an actual destruction like you destroy a pot. Really, you don't destroy the pot, it remains as clay. You destroy the clay, it will remain as clay dust. So something that actually exists can never be destroyed. So if we think of manonasha as actual destruction, that's incorrect. That's not what Bhagavan is talking of. Bhagavan is saying manonasha implies through self-knowledge, the mind just resolves, it stops inhibiting and entangling you in all the objects of the world. Instead, you are with the truth of the very mind itself, which is consciousness, which is Advaitam Brahma. So here Bhagavan therefore says that these two methods are there. Prana, which is the main theme of yoga and pranayama in the Patanjali yoga sense. And then there is mind, which is the main theme of the practice of self-inquiry and self-knowledge. So that is jnana. These two methods are both aiming to come to the mind resolving into its substratum or adhishtanam source. That is what is called destruction of mind. Why? Because as I explained logically, anything that is utterly destroyed will again come back. It only goes back into the source. To some, the former, which is the Patanjali method, may appear easy, and to the others, the latter, which is the self-inquiry based method. Yet, jnana is like subduing a turbulent bull by coaxing it with green grass, while yoga is like controlling through the use of force. So, Bhagavan says, in jnana, what do? You don't actually start controlling the mind in a very violent or a very strong way. Instead, you gently move as though along with the mind, but then say, wherever the mind goes, just consciousness is, the names and forms are not really real, they're not substantive. In this way, Bhagavan says, gently draw back into the mind. Turn your attention back to the source, the thinker, instead of the thought object. So this is a more gentler method, very subtle. Sometimes it is more difficult to practice self-inquiry than yogic pranayama, sure. But Bhagavan points out that once you gain the insight into the method at least, it actually is more gentle. You as though travel with the mind and then gently draw back, turning your attention to what I am. And so therefore, jnana is, Bhagavan says, is like coaxing a turbulent bull with some grass. Well, yoga is controlling the use of force. That's why it's called hatha yoga. Hatha means stubborn application of will. Thus, the wise ones say of the three grades of qualified aspirants, the highest reach the goal by making the mind firm in the self, through determining the nature of the real by Vedantic inquiry, and by looking upon oneself and all the things as of the nature of the real. The mediocre by making the mind stay in the heart through Kevala Kumbhaka and meditating for a long time on the real, and the lowest grade by gaining that state in a gradual manner through breath control, etc. So Bhagavan points out three basic grades of aspirants. No judgment, just we honestly recognize whatever we are, wherever we are, we move to the next stage. That is sufficient. Bhagavan will take care of the rest. So the initial grade is the one who has to use actual pranayama, controlling the breath and inhalation, exhalation, and all of that is excellent. It will work very well for one grade of aspirant. And one who is able to do the kumbhaka or relatively mind and breath are in some control. The real sign here is there are no huge troubling emotions creating some disturbance in the breath itself. If we are a little alert, the breath itself will reflect any kind of continual distress. So if those distresses are there, we need to rely on these breath work and other methods. We need not deny ourselves the benefit of working on the breath, controlling the breath, and so on. But let's say the mind and the prana are relatively manageable. And then the second grade comes in. So that mind stays in the heart through Kevala Kumbhaka and meditating for a long time on the real. So here what happens is there is a relatively a certain quietening of the prana, and then you consciously meditate on the real. So you make a choice. You kind of draw the mind away from the objects and then focus on the real. So there is a little tug of war. Mind keeps going on thinking about objects. You turn the mind back to what am I? That awareness, consciousness, in the light of which all these objects are coming and going. It is like the canvas on which different images are coming and going. In a cinema theater, you turn your attention to the screen, which is unchanging. Not easy, but you develop the skill of repeatedly turning your attention to that screen, which is the self or awareness. The names and forms, the objects just keep coming and going. So whenever an object or a thought comes, let it come and go. You consciously stay with the canvas, that awareness in the light of which this thought came and went. That is for the middling aspirant. What about the best? Well, for the best aspirant, says Bhagavan, they reach the goal by making the mind firm in the self through determining the nature of the real by Vedantic inquiry and by looking upon oneself and all the things as of the nature of the real. So everything is one self. They already have that insight. So through the earlier stages, a person develops this insight that the self is all there is. He may not always be able to stay there. He may not always abide there. He may have the mental and emotional challenges. However, he learns to just abide as a self, ever so short a duration be it, but he has already got that insight of the mind not really active, and then there is just the self alone. So that Vedantic inquiry is included here. Whenever we read Bhagavan's works in extensive detail, it's Vedantic inquiry. You can also take the help of proper Shrotriyas who have studied Vedanta in a proper way, then you will get greater clarity about Bhagavan. Remember, if somebody is very accomplished and clear about Vedanta, they will give you greater clarity about Bhagavan. They will not confuse you, but you should be lucky to get somebody like that. But otherwise, Bhagavan says, by Vedantic inquiry and by looking on oneself as all that exists, everything is just the self. Through Vedantic inquiry, one gets that vritti, that Brahmakara vritti or Aham Spurana, as Bhagavan puts it, arises. Once that arises, then you're ready for the highest type of meditation, which is to make the mind firm in the self. You don't have to do anything more. You don't have to think this is real, that is unreal. You just quieten the mind, just gently draw in, that's it. The mind snaps back into the self. Initially, the mind keeps going out and you keep drawing it back in. After some time, the mind snaps back. For lack of a better word, we can say the mind just falls back into the self and stays there. Maybe for a short time, but still that capacity has got developed for that highest aspirant. And therefore, these are the three aspirants that Bhagavan talks of. Then he goes on to say, the mind should be made to rest in the heart till the destruction of the I thought, which is of the form of ignorance, abiding in the heart. Again, it's interesting how Bhagavan equates the I thought, the ahankara, with avidya or ignorance. When we say manonasha, it is avidya nasha. The destruction or the destruction of ignorance is what is intended, residing in the heart, because that ignorance is very deep rooted. And once that is destroyed, then there is always spontaneous abidance as the self. So till then, the mind should be made to rest in the heart, till the destruction of the ignorance. This itself is jnana. This alone is dhyana as well. So dhyana generally means making an effort to do something. But here, as just knowledge itself, it is meditation. So there's a small difference here. In dhyana, you're making some subtle effort. Even chanting a mantra is dhyana. Or even saying, I am Brahman is dhyana. But then when you see, I am Brahman, the truth of that statement rings true for you. You don't have to even think of that thought. You don't have to think the thought, I am a human being, I am a human being. Similarly, you don't have to think, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. At some stage in the sadhana process, the thinking is no longer required. It's natural abidance. And yet, there is still some sadhana. That is the stage we are talking about, where the person is able to, with very minimal words, come back and see the truth of the statement, I am that self. But it's not 100% all the time spontaneous and so on. So at that stage is what Bhagavan is talking about here, saying this itself is jnana, meaning that itself is the sadhana that has to be done to be in the final abidance. And the rest are mere digression of words, digression from the texts. So if we get into too much of polemics, too much of arguments, too much of discussions, it kind of is a waste of time, because the mind has no end to the kind of answers it seeks. There is no end of questions it can keep on emitting or throwing out. So after some time, you give the mind some first level answers. I don't say we should dismiss all questions you get about yourself, the world, God, and so on. Go for the first level answers, ask people, study Bhagavan, and through Vedantic inquiry, you get one level of clear enough answers to all these questions. After that, you have had enough with questions and answers. You just stay and abide as the self. That's why I would definitely say go for the first level answers which are already available. Don't prematurely say, oh, I don't want any answers. I just want to stay as the self. I want to stay as the self. Doesn't happen. You need some minimum answers. But after that, if there is a lot of discussion in the mind about nitty gritty and more questions, then you say, hey, there is no end to these questions. Let me just abide as the self. Stay with self-inquiry, nitidhyasanam. And so therefore the rest are a mere digression of words. So Vag Vilapanam, says the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There's just a digression, a play of words. There's no end to that. Thus the scriptures proclaim, says Bhagavan. Yeah, he's referring to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Bhagavan, people say he has not studied the scriptures. Not at all. He was omniscient. He knows everything. So thus the scriptures proclaim. Why should he bring scriptures here? Because everything is Vag Vilapanam, says the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Except for the self-knowledge, the Vedantic inquiry, the core, everything else is just digression of words. That's what Bhagavan is quoting here, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Therefore, if one gains the skill of retaining the mind in oneself through some means or other, one need not worry about other matters. The great teachers also have taught that the devotee is greater than the yogis, and that the means to release is devotion, which is of the nature of the reflection on one's own self. So this is Bhagavan's favorite saying, because you can see at many places he refers to this, that The highest devotion is of the nature of reflection on oneself. So, as Bhagavan's devotees, maybe you can see and keep track of this. Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhaktirityabhidiyate. There's a big shloka, but the key verse is this. Swaswarupa Anusandhanam. That is, one dwells on and inquires into the nature of the self. That is bhakti. First one inquires and then one dwells on the conclusion, the understanding that arises upon that inquiry. One needs the help of the gurus, no doubt. One cannot just speculate. It's not a speculative inquiry. Remember, self inquiry is not speculative inquiry. I just go on thinking, who am I? Who am I? It's not a thinking process here. It is a very graded instruction on Vedantic lines, and it is with the backing of Bhagavan's words. If you can take the help of somebody who's a Shrotriya, even better. But then it culminates in something very significant. You learn to understand what is Swatmani Avasthanam, to remain as the self. That insight will come. That is the culmination of Vedantic inquiry or self inquiry, upon which you now have a direct access to that sadhana. You no longer need words, not so much of any more discussions about the Upanishads are required. Once you have touched that Brahmakara Vritti or Aham Spurana, as Bhagavan puts it, once that is touched, the nature of reflection on one's own self, that has been seen to its limit. You have got into the limit of that. So that is why Bhagavan is fond of quoting that. All devotion culminates in this Swaswarupa Anusandhanam, self-inquiry culminating in self-abidance. Thus, it is the path of realizing Brahman that is variously called Dahara Vidya, Brahma Vidya, Atma Vidya, etc. What more can be said than this? One should understand the rest by inference. The scriptures teach in different modes. After analyzing all those modes, the great ones declare this to be the shortest and the best means. So the scriptures are a huge ocean, but an accomplished Shrotriya, one who knows how to teach the text, he will not make you get lost in all the verbiage, in all the polemical discussions, but he will give you the crux. He'll give you that insight by which you can get even much greater clarity into Bhagavan's own method. Sure, we can make out whatever we can by reading and study, but some help is always welcome. It may be your own fellow students, maybe, but that little help from other sources can be welcomed. We need not think, I know everything. Always be a little open. Somebody can give you some little extra insight into what Bhagavan is saying there. So that's why Bhagavan says the scriptures teach in different modes, and after analyzing all those modes, the great ones declare this Jnana Marga to be the shortest and the best. The same path is called Dahara Vidya in one of the Upanishads. Dahara is the highest Vidya which gives knowledge of Brahman. And Brahma Vidya, Atma Vidya, in this way, different Vidyas are described. All of them are this very self-knowledge, says Bhagavan. And then the disciple goes on to ask one more question. By practicing the disciplines taught above, one may get rid of the obstacles that are in the mind, that is, ignorance, doubt, error, etc., and thereby attain quiescence of mind. Yet, there is one last doubt. After the mind has been resolved in the heart, see how Bhagavan says, mind doesn't get physically destroyed. After the mind has been resolved in the heart, there is only consciousness shining as the plenary reality. Plenary means the one which is doesn't have parts. It is all that exists. Plenary, the word means that doesn't have any parts and sections in it. That consciousness alone is. When thus the mind has assumed the form of the self, who is there to inquire? Such inquiry would result in self-worship. Oh, so here the question is saying, up till then he is following Bhagavan. Then suddenly he has assumed, but if you then stay with the self, is it like self-worship? It's like a self-aggrandizement. Is it an ego trip? That's the sudden doubt of the disciple. Such inquiry would result in self-worship. It would be like the story of the shepherd searching for the sheep that was all the time on his shoulders. So the student asks that, I'm already the self, then why should I keep doing the self-inquiry? It's like having a sheep on my shoulders and I'm a shepherd, let's say, then I keep seeking for the lost sheep. And Bhagavan says, the Jiva itself is Shiva. Shiva himself is the Jiva. It is true that the Jiva is no other than Shiva. When the grain is hidden inside the husk, it is called paddy. When it is dehusked, it is called rice. Similarly, so long as one is bound by karma, one remains a jiva. When the bond of ignorance, avidya, is broken, one shines as Shiva, the deity. Thus declares a spiritual text. Accordingly, the jiva, which is mind, is in reality the pure self, but forgetting this truth, the jiva imagines itself to be an individual soul and gets bound in the shape of the mind. So it search for the self, which is itself like the search for the sheep by the shepherd. But still, the jiva, which has forgotten itself, will not become the self through mere mediate knowledge. So Bhagavan says the self inquiry is required. Even though the jiva, the individual, is indeed consciousness which is non dual, nevertheless, there is some process, some journey there. One has to pay attention, turn the mind to pay attention to what is. Otherwise, it won't automatically just come by just some words here and there which we hear. Bhagavan says, by the impediment caused by the residual impressions gathered in previous births, the jiva forgets again and again its identity with the self and gets deceived, identifying itself with the body, etc. So there is an impediment. There's an obstacle in the form of the older habits, the older notions that I am small, I am insignificant, I am the jiva, I have to worry about my future, I have to worry about all the roles I am playing. That is too strong. One can be objective and deal with those roles in one's life, but not easy. But Bhagavan is therefore saying some sadhana is definitely required. So identifying with self, will a person become a high officer by merely looking at him? Is it not by steady effort in that direction that he could become a highly placed officer? Bhagavan is asking a question. So generally there is this conversation. Do we make an effort or do we not make an effort? Well, it's a subtle answer, but first there is an effort involved. It is not effort like chanting a mantra or repeating some words, but nevertheless there is a choice involved. I have to choose to turn away and from getting involved in the thoughts and their ramifications. So there is effort involved, but it's not a gross effort like thinking some specific thought or even imagining I am Brahman, I am Brahman. It's not that kind of an effort, but it is an effort by just dropping what is false, by dropping what is not the truth about you. You just come back to just being that I am. So that is a very subtle effort. So Bhagavan does say there is an effort, but it's not a gross effort because of the impediment of previous janmas from the past lives. And similarly, the jiva, which is in bondage through mental identification with the body, should put forth effort in the form of reflection on the self in a gradual and sustained manner. All these words indicate effort. Sometimes, it's prematurely told, oh, there's no effort. It's all, everything is Brahman. I don't need to do anything. That can be a certain confusion there. So, in a gradual and sustained manner, one should put forth effort in the form of reflection on the self. That is the Swaswarupa Anusandhanam, self-inquiry. And when thus the mind gets destroyed, the jiva would become the self. The reflection on the self, which is thus practiced constantly, will destroy the mind and thereafter will destroy itself like the stick that is used to kindle the cinders burning a corpse. It is this state that is called release. So self-inquiry initially looks like an effort, you turn your attention and so on. After that, that effort subsides. Once you come back to being that self, that effort of self-inquiry, it generates this special vritti aham sphurana that also subsides. Like even a stick is used to kindle a fire and then you drop it into the fire. So aham sphurana therefore is an intermediate state after which even that aham sphurana subsides, leaving the self in its glory. You don't need to do any more practice. Not even this sphurana is required, says Bhagavan there. It's only a tool to remove avidya, to get rid of ignorance. If the jiva is by nature identical with the self, what is it that prevents the jiva from realizing its true nature? And Bhagavan says it is forgetfulness of the jiva's true nature. This is known as the power of veiling, avarana. So avarana means like a veil. The avarana means that which covers like a veil. I can be just half a foot away from something, and yet there is a covering. So I am always one with the self, but there is this mysterious covering, avarana. The power of veiling, says Bhagavan. The original word in Sanskrit and Tamil will be avarana. And so the jiva is identical, but yet there is avarana. To remove and destroy the avaranam, self-inquiry is required. And then the next question the disciple asks, if it is true that the jiva has forgotten itself, how does that I experience arise for all? So if we have forgotten ourselves, how does it arise? So Bhagavan says, if it is completely forgotten, how do you even start the inquiry? Bhagavan says, no, it's not a complete veil where you don't see anything. It's not total darkness. Instead, the veil does not completely hide the jiva. It only hides the self nature of I. What is self nature? That it is fullness, it is infinitude. That is veiled. That I am infinity, that I am limitless. That part is veiled, but not that I exist. I exist, I am conscious. These two are never veiled. Aham asmi sada bhami. I am, that is always present. So the veil doesn't completely hide the existence. Otherwise, there's nothing to start with. It only hides the self nature of I and projects I am the body notion. So instead, I take myself to be the body. But it does not hide the self's existence, which is I and which is real and eternal. So that is the cue. The fact that I exist is available to me, that's enough. If I just turn my attention to the very fact of my existence, come back to the present moment, and see that all that is future and past is but a fleeting thought, and that present moment awareness alone is real, that's self inquiry. So it does not hide the self's existence. So veil only covers it partly. And then the disciple culminates this topic very beautifully, asking, what are the characteristics of the Jivan Mukta, the one who is liberated in life, and the Videha Mukta, one who will be liberated at death? So Jivan Mukti means one who is already fully liberated, but the body continues for a while. The Videha Mukta is one who at the time of death attains to the total liberation. Small distinction, not really, but small distinction is there. Bhagavan further clarifies that by saying, I am not the body, I am Brahman, which is manifest as the self. In me, who am that plenary reality. Plenary reality means that Brahman. The world consisting of bodies are a mere appearance, like the blue of the sky. When I see the sky, it is limitless, doesn't have any color, but I think it is blue. So it's an appearance. It's not utterly imagined. I don't imagine the blue. Everyone sees blue in the sky. Everyone sees the sky as blue under certain conditions, but it is still an appearance. The sky doesn't have any color at all. So that is the knowledge here. So it is a mere appearance. The body is also an appearance, says Bhagavan. And one who has realized this truth, even while the body exists, that's the idea here, is a Jivan Mukta. Yet, so long as his mind has not been resolved, there may arise some misery for him because of relation to objects on account of prarabdha, which is karma, which has begun to fructify and whose result is the present body. So some prarabdha is there. Even with all the knowledge of the self, the body and mind will have some up and down, but there is still no deeper suffering. Always good to remember this, that pain is not in your hands. A difficult situation, not in your hands. It will come in life. But suffering is in your hands, whether to suffer or not. And you can definitely not compound the situation with suffering. So dukkha or pain is there, shoka, suffering need not be there. That is what is Bhagavan's assurance here. And so therefore, one who has realized this truth is a Jivan Mukta, says Bhagavan. So due to prarabdha, certain karmas have already started unfolding. Let them unfold. That cannot be avoided. Some physical misery, some illness, they can come, but there is no suffering. Pain is there, no suffering. Dukkha and shoka, very helpful even for each one of us. In any situation, look at what is dukkha, uncomfortable situation, a lot of challenge in my life, dukkha, I can't avoid it. Shoka, why me? And why am I suffering? There is some freedom there. Remember that Bhagavan's assurance is, if we take recourse to him, we will be able to distinguish, okay, this is dukkha, it will create some unpleasantness, but I can face it. Shoka will not be there, it will resolve. That is the assurance here. And As the movement of mind has not ceased, there will also not be the experience of bliss, because some mind movement is there. So therefore, some pain will be there, which is dukkha. The experience of self is possible only for the mind that has become subtle and unmoving as a result of prolonged meditation. He who is thus endowed with a mind that has become subtle and who has the experience of the self is called a Jivan Mukta. So that's the small distinction. That first, there is a stage where the person has some knowledge, but the mind is still not fully absorbed and assimilated that knowledge. That's not Jivan Mukta. But then Jivan Mukta is one for whom the mind's movements too are no longer creating the sorrow. Still, pain may be there, but he will see the pain as just a fleeting external phenomenon. He won't identify with that pain. That is Jivan Mukti. And then Bhagavan goes on to say, who is endowed with such a mind that has become subtle and who has the experience of the self. Experience here means knowledge, self knowledge which is abiding. He is called Jivan Mukta. It is the state of Jivan Mukti that is referred to as the Nirguna Brahman and as Turiya. So Turiya is not another state. It is the truth of what you are here and now. You are already experiencing Turiya. You don't know it. The veiling is there. You need to get rid of the veil, and Turiya is always there. You will never say, I was not Turiya earlier, now I became Turiya. No, you will only say, I was Turiya, I am Turiya, I will be Turiya, but the veil is no longer there. When even the subtle mind gets resolved and the experience of self ceases, and one is immersed in the ocean of bliss and has become one with it without any differentiated existence, one is called a Videha Mukta upon the body dropping off. So for a jnani, he is a Jivan Mukta even while living. He knows there is pain, there is zero suffering because avidya is gone. Avidya is the cause of the suffering. And once the body, the momentum of the body drops off, then he is a Videha Mukta. He is become one without any differentiated existence. He's become one with everything. That is called Videha Mukti, or Videha Mukta is the person. It is the state of Videha Mukti that is referred to as the transcendent attributeless Brahman and as the transcendent Turiya. So Turiyaga, okay, this is the word used. Turiyaga is the one who is completely immersed in Brahman, no body at all for that jnani. Such a jnani without any body, he is one with all that exists. We cannot see him, but he is there. That is the declaration of these texts. The Yoga Vasishtha and so on talk about this in detail. This is the final goal. Because of the grades in misery and happiness, the released ones, the Jivan Muktas and Videha Muktas, may be spoken of as belonging to four categories: Brahmavid, Brahmavidvara, Brahmavidvariya, and Brahmavidvarishtha. But these distinctions are from the standpoint of the others who look at them. In reality, however, there are no distinctions in release gained through jnana. So, which is the subtle nuance here, that initially there may be aham sphurana, which is a good breakthrough in one's spiritual path. That means you understand what it is to say to be as the self. The essence of self inquiry is already accessible. The next, it's a long journey, but the next stage is called Jivan Mukti of the first order, which Bhagavan calls Brahmavid. So at that stage, the person is completely free of avidya. There is no more suffering. However, the pain and some amount of the bodily and mental movements will happen. But then let us say the person is always immersed in a certain trance-like state and becoming one with the self. The body slowly drops off. In that categorization, these other categories are there: Brahmavidvara, Brahmavidvariya, and Brahmavidvarishtha. So all these categories, Bhagavan says, they are all from the standpoint of the viewer. They are all Jivan Muktas. Even if there is some pain, doesn't mean the Jivan Mukta suffers any pain. So it doesn't matter for him. But there are other Jivan Muktas who choose to freeze the mind, so to speak. It's a kind of mental and physical hibernation. They don't care even for the body. Nothing wrong in that. They become one with everything that exists. They still help people. They still are available in a sense as Ishvara, the cosmic reality. It's not like they don't exist. They exist, but as one with everything. So some jnanis have that kind of a journey or a prarabdha, and so therefore they even get into this samadhi like trance where the mind and body freeze altogether and drop off. So there are grades in that which Bhagavan refers to, but they are not essential. It's not like those are the sign of Jivan Mukti. Even before, like Bhagavan himself, Jivan Mukti, but they are transacting with the world from the external point of view, as seen by the bystanders, the others. So, but they are still Jivan Muktas. There are no distinctions in Jnana, and there are no distinctions in the release gained from the Jnana. It's not as if the one who is in Samadhi, which eyes closed, that Jnani goes somewhere else and the other Jnani is still there, nothing like that. All of them are one with Ishvara, they're one with the truth. So, thus, Bhagavan beautifully culminates and answers these very subtle and quite scholarly questions of Gambhiram Seshaya. And we now come to the end of this series of lectures. The last few questions were a little easy, so I was able to go through them in today's session. And by Bhagavan's grace, all of us will definitely progress from where we are to the next step without second guessing or putting ourselves down. It is my prayer that we continue to do whatever we can along the instructions of Bhagavan. Definitely, His grace is always there. We have to just reach out, spare that time to do His smarana of His name, and then self inquiry if we have the ruchi and the capacity. Self inquiry is, of course, the bread and butter of Bhagavan's teaching. With these two methods, we will definitely gain all that is required for our bliss and spiritual progress. So I will end this series of classes on Atma, self-inquiry or Vichara Sangraha. So thank you everyone and Namaste. I will end with the Shanti mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Namo Ramana sir. Thank you so much for your guidance this evening. We shall meet you next month. Till then, I will now request Narayananji and Rajesh ji at the shrine in Raman Kendra, Delhi to conclude the session today. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
Rajesh ji, Akshar Manamalai.
What type of? What do you say?
It seems Akshar Manamalai is unlikely to happen today because of Narayanaji's health. Please give me a minute, I will check and then we will conclude. Namo Ramana, we may not be able to have Manamalai because of Narayananji's health. Raghav sir, would you be able to help us with Akshar Manamalai this evening? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yes, I will just locate my.
Thank you, sir.
Just give me 2 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Namaste, Anuragji. So we'll just chant Arunachala Shiva
Sure,
because
sir.
there's another
Sure.
connection going on. Om Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. 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 அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவரகத்தை வேறறுப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. அழகு சுந்தரம் போலகமும் நீயும் முற்றபின்னமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா. ஓம்.
Namo Ramana. Thank you so much, Raghavji, for a very deep and enlightening session, as well as the chanting of Akshar Manamale. We shall meet you again next month around similar time. This is the conclusion of this evening's satsang with Raghavji. Namo Ramana. May Bhagwan bless us all.